Hello, welcome to AP Environmental Science, and I'm talking to you from the Jamaica Bay National Wildlife Refuge, and actually is not far from us in Queens. We're here because this has so much to do with what we're going to be learning this year. First thing is we're going to be learning a lot about ecology and the type of ecosystem that I'm in right now. It's a saltwater marsh, and behind me, well, I don't see too much wildlife, at least there, but elsewhere I'll show you some of the birds that are here. Of course, you see a lot of plants and its tidal. Also, if you look behind me, you can see the impact that we have on ecosystems, and that is what we're going to be spending a lot of our time discussing. Behind me, you can see part of the Manhattan skyline. You might be able to see, let me just get out of the way. You might be able to see the Freedom Tower. You might be able to see the Empire State Building and some of the other buildings. And right in front of the Empire State Building, in the foreground, you notice a mound, a little bit of a hill. That hill actually is a covered-over landfill. All of the garbage in New York City is sent elsewhere, and we still have landfills from what was done before it was closed. And we're going to be learning about how we protect the environment from all that dumped garbage. So here we are at the power plant now, and we're going to look at some other videos just a little bit later in this podcast. Since this is one of our first podcasts, and we're learning how to actually do podcasts, we're starting with the questions at the end. And you might, when you're watching a podcast, you actually might want to skip to the end, copy down the questions, and then watch the podcast with those questions. And of course, you should be taking notes when you are watching the podcast. Like anything you see written on the screen, that should go into your notes. Now, these questions here actually are harder than what you normally would see in my everyday podcast, because here you're actually, like here, writing a title for each theme, you are going to have to do some thinking with it. You have to organize the different titles of different units and come up with the theme for each one. Normally, the questions would just simply be, simply writing down either what was written on the screen or what I said. There's not a lot of thinking involved with it. Thinking we do in class. But since we're watching this podcast in class, and you're possibly working on this with someone else, and I'm there to help you, the questions here are a little bit harder. So while you're watching this, keep in mind as we go through an overview of this whole year of AP Environmental Science, you're going to have to write a title for each theme. I'm already going to have all of the units organized for you, so you're going to have to do the organizing for yourself. And then in one sentence, you need to explain why that title is an appropriate title. Here's theme 1. And this one is, a lot of this stuff we have learned before. It is some things that we haven't learned already. Most of the stuff some of you learned with me in the living environment. And we have the energy pyramid, and I'm going to show you a little clip about that right now. Look around. What do you see mostly? Plants. These are the primary producers, so that you see lots and lots of them. And as you go up the food chain, you'll find fewer and fewer because less and less energy is available. Top of this platform is an eagle's nest, more particularly an osprey's nest. That's the top predator. And look around, you don't see it because there's so little energy left at the top that you'll find very, very few of those top predators. One type of animal you find a lot of in wetlands are birds. And Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge is blessed with a lot of them. This actually is not all that many. The time when you find a lot of them is not during the summer, which is when I'm taping this, during the fall and the spring, when migrating birds tend to stop here for a little while. Then we have matter cycles, which are things like the water cycle, the carbon cycle. Evolution, where we're going to be looking at, evolution is more like the unifying theme of all biology. Biology makes sense through evolution, and it's how species evolve into other species, how species end up having certain adaptations. And then we're going to look at how different species interact with each other, and that's communities. Biomes are much larger than communities, much larger than ecosystems. It's sort of like a regional ecosystem. A desert is an example of a biome. And then we're going to look at population. Populations are groups of organisms of the same species and what affects the size of the population. Now we come to theme 2. And here we are switching from looking at the non-human and looking more at human. We're not just looking at populations of organisms, we're looking at human populations. We'll be looking at diseases that affect humans, both diseases that are infectious, like for example AIDS, and also diseases that are caused by the environment. For example, diseases that are caused by the environment, for example, toxins in the environment. Like we're going to learn about love canal, which that has a pretty name, is pretty infamous actually, and it was a community which had to be completely evacuated because of toxins in the environment. Here's Jamaica Bay again, and you see how clean the water seems to be? Well, it probably is. It wasn't always this way. All of our sewage used to go raw right into the Jamaica Bay or into Hudson River. So we're going to find out what happens to stuff after it's left the toilet. How do we keep these waters clean? And that fit right in there because we also have to look at how we get our food. We're going to look at agriculture. We're going to look at fishing. We're also going to look at how we stop pests from eating our food. Theme 3 we go into why biodiversity is important. Biodiversity is the number of species that are in a particular area. We look at why that's important, how we keep an ecosystem having a large amount of biodiversity, and if the biodiversity is lost, how do we go about restoring that biodiversity? Okay. For theme 4, just want to show you a real quick right now. No, I'm not out in Arizona. I'm still in Jamaica Bay in Queens. And yes, this is cactus. And yes, this cactus is actually native to Queens. And this sort of demonstrates that we are going to be learning, and we do need to know earth science, because earth science is part of the environment, and how the earth science how geology impacts the environment here is that the soil here is very, very sandy. So whenever it rains, and we had a downpour yesterday, so whenever it rains, that soil was very, very permeable, and the water just goes straight down, so basically there's not a lot of water that's available to the plants. That creates desert-like conditions, and so you can end up with prickly pear cactus doing pretty well here in Jamaica Bay. For AP Environmental Science, there are certain courses which you have to have under your belt in order to succeed in this course. Biology is one of them. Earth Science is the second one. Chemistry is the third one. And Earth Science, like biology, is important enough that we have units that you learned already in Earth Science, and we're reviewing them. In Geology, we're going to learn about rocks and minerals. We're going to learn about plate tectonics. We're going to learn about weather. We're going to learn about climate. These things you learn in Earth Science. Then we're going to expand on that and go into some areas you may not have learned about, and there we're going to look at the impact on us and the impact we have on the environment too. We're going to look at air pollution, and we're going to look at water use and management. Like I said in the clip earlier, how does New York City get its water? Where does that water come from? And also going to look at how we've polluted the water, like we're seeing a lot of clips of Jamaica Bay. Jamaica Bay used to be very, very polluted. And people used to say that if you fell in, you dissolved before you drowned. But now Jamaica Bay is much, much cleaner. Here we have another view of Manhattan, and you see the Empire State Building there, and you've got the filled over landfill in the foreground. We've already discussed the landfill. A couple of other questions I want to pose to you that we will be answering this year. New York City has millions of people living there. How do they all get fed? In addition to getting rid of all the garbage that gets thrown away. And how do we get all of the water? There used to be a reservoir inside of New York City. New York City used to get its water from Manhattan. But the pond was all polluted by a tannery. And now all the water has to, and actually now the pond's gone, it's all filled in. And used to be 40 streams, I think, in New York City. Those are all gone or moved underground. And all the water has to come from elsewhere. We're going to find out where it comes from. And where does all the food come from? How does New York City get its power? All these things we're going to be looking at. Environmental science is probably one of the most useful courses, most applicable courses to your life that you're going to be taking in high school, because so much of this applies to your life now and in the future, and so much of this you're going to be voting on in elections in the future.
Theme 5. We're looking at before. We're looking at how New York City gets its energy. The energy moves into two kinds: conventional energy, which is, for example, conventional energy would be energy by burning coal. Sustainable energy, an example of that would be solar energy. That's sustainable because it's not going to run out. We can run out of coal by digging it all to the ground. We would not run out of solar energy because we're not going to run out of sunlight. And then we're going to look at how we get rid of our waste. And when you take your garbage out, what happens to it? What happens to something that's hazardous? Like something that would be very, very hazardous would be say you have the acid in your batteries. You can't just simply litter your batteries. That can cause serious problems to the water that's in the ground. And then we're going to look at planning on cities and how we can move cities into sustainable cities. Cities which work with the environment rather than polluting. Like, I'm sure you heard the phrase London fog. But the fog of London back in the 1950s or so was not like the fog in San Francisco. It was caused by pollution, and this pollution killed many, many people. Then we're going to look at the economics of the environment, and we're going to look at environmental laws and treaties. Laws are basically within a country, like Congress and presidents will pass laws, and that only affects the United States. Treaties are between many, many different governments, and that would affect something like, say, hunting of whales. And now back to our concluding questions. So for this assignment, for each of those themes, you need to write down a title, and in one sentence, explain why that title that you chose is an appropriate title.